Welcome to the Indigenous Nations Conservation Alliance podcast, where Native voices lead the conversation on conservation, stewardship, and our responsibilities to the lands and waters that sustain us. Across Indian country, our homelands carry stories of relationship, resilience, and knowledge passed down through generations of people who live with the land and listen to what it teaches. Through conversations with tribal producers, ranchers, conservation leaders, elders, and community partners, we share the teachings and experience that continue to guide how we care for the water, the land, and the living systems that surround us. Together across Indian country, we recognize the spirit carried in our waters, our homelands, and our ecosystems, and we honor our role as caretakers for those yet to come. We begin today's conversation by giving gratitude to the land, the waters, and the foods that nourish us. We honor the ancestors who carry the food knowledge and the Blackfeet knowledge holders who continue this work today. This episode focuses on food sovereignty, traditional foods, and how traditional ecological knowledge is woven into the food systems and teachings. We are joined today by knowledge holder Dani Antelope of the FAST Blackfeet, who carries deep teachings about food, the culture, and the community resilience. Food sovereignty means more than what we eat. It's about our relationship to the land, the plants, the animals, and the seasonal cycles. Traditional ecological knowledge provides the foundation for how Blackfeet people sustain food systems that are healthy, that are culturally grounded, and ultimately that how we show resilience. We are honored to welcome Dani Antelope, a respected FAST Blackfeet knowledge holder. Dani's work and teachings focus on reconnecting community members to food knowledge and restoring balance between traditional practices and food systems. Dani, could you share a little bit about yourself, your family roots, and how you came to food knowledge as a FAST Blackfeet knowledge holder?
Okay, Emmett, thanks for having me on the podcast. I am a mother and a student and a learner and a teacher in the community. I come from a family who spends a lot of time on the land. I grew up going on trips on the land and enjoy doing that with my children as well. Before today's interview, I also had to go on the land because I knew I was going to be talking about it. So I guess I'm just somebody who enjoys connecting with the land, but also teaching people about what it provides so much more than food, right? And the connection to who we are as people. At FAST Blackfeet, I'm the co-director. Served as a board member for a while before becoming the director here, and really help share the vision and the work of having full circle programming for food systems by first providing food for people, but also teaching people where food comes from and how to cook those foods. That's something that's so special about where you and I come from, is we get to look out the window or take a ride and see our entire food system from the top of the mountains to the miles of plains. So we're very fortunate to have that daily reminder here.
Yeah, nice to meet you, Dani. Nice to have you on the podcast, and I'm really excited to see your view on like food and food sovereignty, and just like what it means to us as Bikani, us as Nitsitapi, Siksikaitsitapi, just across the plains to the mountains, like you said, understanding where our food comes from, how it shapes us, how negative food that we put in our systems, can ultimately drive us away from that land and that true identity of who we are as Nitsitapi. When you hear the words food sovereignty, what does that mean for you and your community?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a challenging question too, as food sovereignty becomes a buzzword right now. To me, food sovereignty means food access and food sustainability, right? You can jump to the sustainability pieces until we aid in the immediate need of people needing the education on what happened to the food system, people having access to those kind of opportunities, people having access to buffalo meat if we're telling them that they should be eating buffalo meat to reclaim their foods and reclaim their culture. So that's all the immediate things, right? But also food sustainability is taking people out on the land and teaching them how to identify medicines, teaching them how to be generational food trauma breakers, right? There's so much to recognize in the system and so much opportunity for our community to be healthy if we're all looking at food sovereignty as reclaiming our power and our connection to the land.
No, those buzzwords that you were talking about, trauma, cycles, breaking the cycle, and just food sovereignty as a whole, it means everything to who we are, what it means to be and it's to be. And understanding that, at some point in time that our community was separated from our traditional foods and those ecological cycles, the movements of the plants, the animals, the seasons. How do Blackfeet ecological cycles, like the movements of the plants, the animals, and the seasons, shape food gathering and preparation practices within, or what you see at like FAST Blackfeet and your work that you do at here with your nonprofit?
Yeah, that's a good question. Basically, how do the plant relatives teach us, right? Because when we're looking at like the calendar versus looking at the seasonal realm for harvesting, it's very different. What we watch for is a lot more land and energy type of connections, right? Those supernatural signs that we get that let us know that we should start preparing. And then certain plants that we can watch for, right? The crocus plant that we know is prepared for coming earlier in the spring because it's all fuzzy and has all these little hairs on it. And it's really cool to see the way that nature is already prepared for different climates and different weathers, different areas on the land. And I think it also teaches us how to be adaptable and how to be resilient, right? When I think about the land and what it holds for us, it also holds memory. It's like a silent observer, right? It's always watching and making sure that we're taken care of, even though we don't know that's what it's doing. So those medicines have been there and they continue to come back. One of the good examples is that this last year was a really plentiful harvesting season. And within the community, within our growing health program, and just my family and other harvesters in the community, everybody noticed the Savas berries were plentiful and had heavy branches, and the peppermint was tall and healthy, and all of those things that signal to us that the plant relatives are taking care of us. But our duty in that role is that we learn about those plants and we take care of those plants and we harvest them sustainably so that they can keep coming for future generations. And I think that's one of the cool things we do at FAST Blackfeet is when we take people out on the land, we teach all of the ethics of it, right? Like that you should be giving what's the whole point of giving an offering when you're harvesting, and why you shouldn't harvest more than you need, and why you should always be respectful on the land, right? No gossiping and no shouting and those types of things that keep us in good energy when we're harvesting. And that's what plants remind us, is that they're how to keep peace, how do you care for relatives, because when we're harvesting, one of the things we teach in the class also is that when we're harvesting, you're caring for your relatives. You're like preparing medicines. Right now I have a jar and a half left for the season. And when I let my mom know, she was like, have a paper bag full, like we're okay. And that's cool that it's not just my stash and her stash, but like we're taking care of each other with plants and medicines the way that my grandmas always have. And FAST Blackfeet is a amazing opportunity that I get to have this outlet to influence with being able to do this for so much more other families.
Wow. No, that's really good. Understanding, what you said, how traditional knowledges and traditional foods, are harvested and stored and shared within our families and the wider community, and just understanding where we are to practice TEK around food in general.
Yeah, that's a big question. Because there's so much pieces to it that sometimes it just hasn't been broken down in our schools or loud enough in our community that it is intentional, right? Like that the foods that were replaced and the ration foods that came in have so much less nutrients than the land-based foods that we were eating. And they make us so much less reliant on the land, right? We don't need the land as much. We don't rely on the land as much. We don't connect with it as much if we have these super processed foods coming right to our door. And when we don't share enough information and opportunity for people to make those changes within their generation, then that's what makes it hard, right? My mom had so many hamburger and beef recipes passed down to me, but no buffalo recipes. And like it's hard to recognize what convenient foods uh, have shaped the way that we think about the foods that we eat. Right? It's actually a lot more simple if we harvested and had to raise our own food. Um, well, then I lost my train of thought.
No, that's fine. Understanding that, that's the goal, that's the dream, right? Getting back to that traditional food system because it remembers us and our body ultimately remembers it. Understanding that buffalo meat is something that we survived on for tens and thousands of years, and that traditional food isn't something of the past for us because we've only been disrupted in that colonial process for about 100 years, give or take, maybe 20. Just understanding the basic concepts of what we put into our body is ultimately what we're going to be getting out, and seeing those processed foods being shelf packed and promoted, and through that colonial disruption, understanding, even rations wasn't good for us, and it got us hooked on commodity cheese to, we glorify it almost, understanding that it's not good for us. It's plastic, and it's been almost glorified so much to us that we kind of almost defend it to the point where it became traditional for us, almost like red wieners around here for those listening in.
I was just gonna say that.
Is this meat that isn't good for your body, but now it's traditional food because it's been brought into our traditional spaces so much that to the point where when it was discontinued, we started advocating for it.
I think a good point on that is when I talk about that it takes individual households to make real change, right? People take example, and so it takes people to also say we recognize that these are survival foods that we're serving, and not traditional foods, and we should share that because that's education in itself. And then it's not education is the first step, right? And then action is second. So then you start serving traditional foods, or you start advocating for buffalo as hard as you advocate for red wieners. Um, I think that that's a really good example of the way that maybe there's opportunity, right? There's so much opportunity for us to advocate and be rebellious advocates once we recognize that the system is built against us. It's built for us to be diabetics and for us to be reliant and for us to be disconnected. Um, and then it also includes, you're talking about what we eat is the way that we feel, and what we eat is the way that we have memory. But it's also the way that we harvest helps with our mental health, right? Being outdoors and being on the land, physically on the land, and not surrounded by televisions and screens, um, allows us to to feel more connected. I think that you don't really get to feel the benefits of the land uh, if you're not on it.
Right. The land and foods, they're not inherently separate. All of our ecosystems all of our aspects in an ecosystem play an important role. And they play off of each other. Last question, Danny, when we're thinking about Blackfeet and we're thinking about food sovereignty, and I know that you're passionate about this work. I've seen the talks you've given, I've seen the work that you've done. And to say the least is that you know what it takes for the boots on the ground to be boots on the ground. I've seen you lead in areas that needed leadership. When you envision the future of Blackfeet food sovereignty, what gives you hope?
It's a good question because I think I said it's a good question to all your questions because this is a good topic and it's not talked about enough. I think it's really hopeful for the Blackfeet food system because we are such a golden nugget. And I say it all the time, like you can recognize when people are golden nuggets, but to be the tribe that we are on the land that we are on uh, is just super special. Um, we protect the headwaters. We have a food system from the top of those mountains to the plains, and we are just located in such a good spot that we have the actual potential to have food sovereignty intact. It's harder for tribes that are in cities or have disruption to their reservation communities in different ways. So, one thing that we have intact is that our community is so compact in one area, and that is opportunity for influence. We have land, so much land, right? Our uh, reservation is the size of Delaware, and there's a lot of opportunity for us to grow our food and own our food and take control of our food system, teach people about our land, support our local producers, and have a closed loop system. When I think of food sovereignty, uh, I think of the government not having any kind of assistance to us and everybody being able to be self-sufficient within our community and take care of ourselves and feed ourselves within our borders, right? If there's ever a time that we had to close our borders and feed ourselves, that we'd be able to do it. And that means like a lot of preparation, a lot of education, a lot of trauma breaking. And sometimes when people think of that, they're like, oh, that's so far-fetched. Like, oh, that's so like living in the past. But I think the more people that we have that could see it um and change their mindset, then that's where the real justice is to our future generations, right? Like we all have a responsibility, and the more of us doing that and supporting that uh, is what really gets us to food sovereignty. So I guess I see a healthy and a food secure Blackfeet Nation for us to ever be food sovereign. And not because that's FAST Blackfeet's vision, but literally because we know that our mission at FAST Blackfeet is not done until
we are a healthy and food secure Blackfeet Nation. And to us, that's what food sovereignty means. Everyone uh, has healthy and culturally relevant foods, and being able to support that locally and reclaim our health, not be a sick people because we reclaimed our health through land and through food, uh, is what I see for the future of food sovereignty in the Blackfeet Nation.
Beautiful. No, that's great. That's looking forward. One of the most powerful things that you shared, throughout today was, food sovereignty is more than what we eat. It's about our relationship to the land, the plants, the animals, and the season cycles. It's about participating within our surrounding traditional knowledges. TEK provides the foundation for how Blackfeet people sustain food systems that are healthy, culturally grounded, and resilient. Dani, we thank you for your generosity in sharing your wisdom on food and on TEK. Um, that again, for those who are listening in, it's a respected, FAST Blackfeet knowledge holder. Of course, Dani here, work and teachings focus on reconnecting community members to food knowledge and restoring balance between traditional practices and in today's food systems. Just a simple dialogue. When we get thinking about food systems in general, is like how can we deepen our relationship with food, land, and traditional ecological knowledge in daily life? And what does food sovereignty look like when it comes to food, health, and community resilience? With that, Dani, we thank you for your generosity.
Thank you, Emmett.
Yeah. And we leave our listeners with this reminder: food is medicine, food is memory, and food is sovereignty. Thanks, Dani. You're listening to the Inca podcast. This program is supported through grant funding from the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service, the Rural Climate Smart Initiative, and the Indigenous Grazing Lands Coalition. These efforts help support grassroots producers, tribal ranchers, and the conservation partners working to strengthen stewardship across Indian country as a whole. The views expressed are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of the USDA. To learn more about Inca and our work, visit us online and join us for the next conversation. Thank you.